This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm Drew Dixon. I'm the chief content nerd at Love Thy Nerd and co-host of this here podcast. I'm joined with Chris Gwaltney. Hey, Chris.
Hey, I'm the chief executive nerd for Love Thy Nerd and the co-part of the host of the podcast. It's why Drew has to call himself a co-host, is because I'm here.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Sorry, dude.
I can't be like the host, the only host. But,
better luck next podcast.
how you been, man?
Oh, good. I'm in deep with Stellaris. Have I told you about Stellaris?
Yeah, I saw you post about it. I don't even
know what
it is, though.
It is like, I mean, it's basically Civilization in space. So like the game Civilization, you know? Mm-hmm. But it's in space. And so you like start out as this little fledgling star empire and you just try to spread across the galaxy. But
that's interesting because I've never heard you talk about those types of games.
I don't like them. Oh, I mean, I tried Civilization years and years ago and never really liked it. But I think part of that was the theme, because like anything space themed, I'm all in. Yeah. So yeah, it's got its hooks in me deep.
That's cool. I may have to check it out. This is an update to this podcast because we've mentioned on here before, but you sent me Sekiro.
Sekiro, yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. So I'm dipping my toes in. I really haven't got that far, but I already think I'm gonna really like it.
Are you past the prologue stuff yet?
Yeah, barely. I've played like a little bit past that, so
okay.
You know,
Oh.
But that kind of stuff's my jam, so I'm looking forward to it. We have a special guest, and I'm just going to go for it on your last name. But this is Gabe Graziani.
Nailed it. You got it in one.
Ooh-wee.
Nice.
Yeah.
Drew.
Your full name is Gabriel. Some people may know you as Gabriel, I guess, but people who know you personally call you Gabe,
That is
right?
correct. That is correct.
Cool. And so you work for Ubisoft. Tell us kind of like, how would you frame what you do?
Sure. Okay. So I am what we call a community developer. And the overall idea is that we serve as a bridge between the community that plays games and the developers who make them. So any communication that is supposed to be happening like online or whatever, like players are complaining about something or they really like something or they have changes they want to see made, it's our job to go and seek those things out and then communicate them back to our developers. And then when developers do patches or anything like that, it's our job to communicate those things back to players.
Yeah. You are doing the Lord's work. Name one time a player has complained about anything.
Well, for 6 years I worked on Assassin's Creed, so there were definitely moments when players were discontent, I guess.
You're being nice. That's why you have the job you have, is because you're good at being nice.
But you must have been pretty successful because, Assassin's Creed's on game number 700 or so.
Yeah,
at least.
Exactly right again. Exactly right again.
We're good. We're good with numbers.
So you must be killing it, taking all those complaints and turning them into gold, you know?
Well, I have to admit, the Assassins team has evolved a ton over time, and they are incredibly, reactive to the things that players say. And I think, to be honest, it's across the board, and especially with, the live games that we have, like For Honor and Rainbow Six, they have had to get real good about implementing changes quickly. And I feel like you can already see, how it's influencing the entire company. Even Division 2 now, we have Tom Clancy's Division 2. They're it's just, for us, it's like a best practice because people respond a lot more to having their concerns addressed like
Totally.
quickly and concisely. So
Well, you see it.
Yeah.
I think you see it in the Assassin's Creed franchise for sure. Like, look at the kind of reception that, Origins and Odyssey, like these latest forays have gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that the team is responding and, being flexible.
Yep. It's what we strive for.
It's interesting because it makes me think about like the state of, I don't know, the relationship between developers, publishers, and their audience. Because I mean, I think of like Mass Effect 3 and that whole kerfluffle, and how like the community basically demanded a new ending, and they basically got it. And then like more recently, just here in the last couple weeks, that Sonic trailer came out.
Couple
It's
days,
not exactly.
Yeah. That was like yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure when this will come out, but
Yeah.
But like, I mean, it's not a video game, but it is basically, right, in the sense of how people responded. And I think last I heard, they're gonna change the direction.
The director tweeted, right? Did you see that?
Yeah. I also thought it was funny because it reminded me of like a oh gosh, what's the name of the director that made like Fantastic Mr. Fox and
Wes Anderson?
Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
So to me, the visuals of the Sonic film looked kind of like that. It's like, oh, it's totally fine for Wes Anderson to do it, but you better not make my Sonic movie like that.
I would love to see a Wes Anderson.
Dude, I would pay
be
millions of dollars for a Wes Anderson Sonic movie.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what if they had. Maybe it would have been okay if they had hired Wes Anderson to do it. Then everyone might have been like, "Oh, this is going to be great." Yeah. But
they could have done the exact same trailer and then just a film by Wes Anderson, and people have been like, "You know what? Okay, all right, yeah, I'm into it."
Gabe, I'm willing to bet you're going to have some thoughts on this. I hope so, or I'm not a very good co-host. Thinking about this Sonic thing, and maybe even in the context of like Assassin's Creed stuff or what work you've done with Ubisoft, like it's a dangerous precedent too, in some ways. Like, hey, enough people complained, and so now we'll change this thing.
Yeah.
But maybe that change isn't really what's needed, No,
that's
like, I don't know where you draw the line or.
Well, that's just it. We have so many discussions about that exact thing, right? And I think I've been watching some of the conversation around the Sonic changes, and I think some of the points that resonate the most with me are now everyone is going to have to crunch that much harder to completely redesign this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like a decision that's just made by the director like overnight based on, people ranting and raving about stuff, which I'm
based on Twitter and Reddit.
Yeah.
Like in like a 48-hour period or less.
And so like I think that's a primary function of like at least our job is when we look at like signal to noise is to figure out like what, because a lot of times people will ask for things they don't really want or align themselves with a behavior that we just don't see them actually perform, right? Like, because the way that we have our game set up is we always want to make sure that we're providing players with the kinds of things they want to do, right? So we try to keep an eye on, how much activities are engaged with. We don't keep any personal data or anything like that. Like, there's all kinds of laws about that.
Sure.
We don't do that. But we do try to make sure that we know what people are interacting with, how effectively we're creating those things and stuff like that, sentiment and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of effort into trying to figure out like, okay, so they're saying they want this. Is like when we implement something similar, does that bear out? Are people like attracted to that?
Right.
Are they actually engaging with this? Like, there's tons of that stuff. So to see it turn around so quickly, it's like, oh, we're doing it like this now? I don't know.
Right.
If we can.
Yeah.
That's hard because, humans do this thing where they say one thing and do another. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is you guys are trying to bridge that. Like, okay, you're saying this thing, but like, what's the data actually show? Like, what do your activities actually show? Or, You know, like you're trying to bridge those two things and reconcile them.
Well, and part of it too is that you want to hear the feedback in terms of what it is that people want changed, and then especially in our role as community developers, like we're not like actually programming anything or designing anything ourselves, so we need to take that feedback to our developers and let them do their job, right? Which is to answer that, to respond to that feedback with their idea of what's going to be fun. Like we have to respect their expertise in that area. We can't just say like, oh, well, they want this feature, so you have to implement it exactly this way.
Right.
That doesn't work. That makes them really angry, actually.
Well, I was thinking about that in the context of the Sonic thing, because there's so many logistical things that the lay person like me, I don't have a clue about. You know, I can sit here and gripe and say, oh, his eyes look stupid or, you know, he's too tall or whatever. But I mean, it looks like it's a dude in a suit or like a kid in a suit that they're doing CGI over top of. Honestly, it looks like an emo kid in skinny jeans. You know, but and so I don't know what it costs. Like, I'm assuming rendering something full on CGI is more expensive than putting an emo kid in skinny jeans that are green. Like, so there's all these elements and all these factors and variables that, you know, the layperson has no idea, but we can just still sit here and gripe all the time.
100%. You know? It's kind of scary, to be honest. Like, I mean, because we have had our instances where, you know, on Assassin's Creed Revelations, we had our multiplayer was not meeting the expectations of our players, and they wanted to have like they're on our forums talking about having a boycott where they would just not play for a long time. And it's funny because we're like at a point where we're like, well, we want to respond to their feedback and implement the changes that, you know, will satisfy them. But at the same time, it's like, well, we almost can't do it now because we can't make it like, well, the next time you're upset, just threaten to boycott and we'll go ahead and do whatever you want to do.
Right. Totally. Yeah. That's the precedent. Right?
Yeah. It's tough because I also think about like innovation and like, you know, making games that are really like take risks and things, because I think, like I think of a game like Far Cry 2 that
here we go.
When it, it's one of my favorite games ever. But like when it came out, I think there were a lot of people that were frustrated with it. There were a lot of people that loved it, but there were a lot of people that were frustrated with how punishing the game was at times, like, and the way the checkpoints worked and things, and like the fact that you're gun jammed, you have malaria, and all the game is very oppressive, and I think that's what makes it, like, to me, makes it super special. Like that game, like we wouldn't have Breath of the Wild, I think, if we didn't have Far Cry 2, probably. Like there's a lot of like
cuts,
the same thing. Like your swords break and you have to adapt on the fly to your favorite sword breaking. I mean that's Far Cry,
incredible.
That's Far Cry 2,
I know several developers
kind
at
of
Ubisoft that would love to hear you make that comparison.
Well, hey, we have this great podcast you can share with them if you go to lovethynerd.com/ anyway.
There may be a little bit of hyperbole there, but I do think that game has influenced a lot of other great games. And, you know, had you guys at the start of that been like, oh, okay, well, we'll just get rid of all the gun jamming stuff, like, I think it would have ruined the game. No, but I think not ruined the game, but I think it wouldn't have been as special and unique, and maybe influential of a game. You know what I mean? Even though it might make the fans happier to some degree. So I just wonder, like, how you balance that.
It's funny that you bring up Far Cry 2 because, like, that technically is before my time at Ubisoft. Like at that point, I was still like a game critic working out of San Francisco, and I remember. I don't believe that I actually covered Far Cry 2, but I remember hearing the discussion around it. And then after that, when I was working at Ubisoft, there was a lot of discussion because one of the developers on it is like has quite a bit of notoriety around him, Clint Hawking. He used to discuss things like ludonarrative dissonance, which is that weird feeling that you have when the game is telling you like, oh, your child has been kidnapped. You got to go save them. And you're like, okay. And then you run across a farmer who's like, hey, I dropped my apples. Can you help me pick them up? And you're like, I mean, is there experience there for me? Because I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah. What's the reward for those apples? I've got time.
so like Far Cry was sort of like Far Cry 2, from my understanding of it, was like an attempt to bring some realism that would like help you feel more in the world, right? Like help you feel more like that, like, so you have malaria, so you always like, you don't have time pressure because of some arbitrary timer. You have time pressure because you need to find this medication that you need to survive, right? So like, I like, it's that kind of thing is something that Ubisoft is always looking for in each game. Each game needs to have like some kind of breakthrough, like some kind of thing that is going to be like its intense like hook that is different than other games. And for some, I think that, like Far Cry 2, it's a lot more clear that there's more than one, right? Like, but yeah, it's Far Cry 2 occupies a very special place, I think, in our like library of games for that exact reason.
Well, it definitely holds a special place for Drew, let me tell you.
Chris, I'm telling you, you would love
any chance he gets.
Like like Far Cry 2, I'm telling you, you love the Souls games. Like
I do.
There's a especially if you play like in kind of the hardcore mode where you only save at checkpoints. It definitely has like a Souls vibe to it, I think, that you would love. So I think they updated, I might be wrong, but originally like you could only save at checkpoints. You couldn't do a quick save at all. I think now on the PC you can quick save, but if you just force yourself to like not ever quick save and only save when you get to like one of the safe houses, oh, it's so great. Because it gives you that same feeling like in Dark Souls where you're like, oh, I've got to get to the next bonfire.
Yeah.
And you're carrying so many souls and like, you know, same kind of similar kind of idea. Anyway.
Serious stakes, right? Like it makes that really important to get to that checkpoint. Yeah,
for sure. But we shouldn't talk about Far Cry 2. I mean, we could. I could. But tell us, Gabe, about like some of the games you've worked on for you. Well, also I'm curious, like about maybe we should rewind a little bit. You said you were a game critic before.
Yeah.
Who did you work? What did you do in games criticism and writing?
So I started in writing at Games Radar, and then did about a year there, and then moved on to GameSpy, which was it's funny because we were actually on the same floor in the same building as IGN, and and like it was really weird to be around like all of those journalists essentially like from IGN when we weren't actually IGN. We were like a different. I mean, ostensibly GameSpy's focus was more PC than console.
Yeah,
but I was the Xbox 360 editor, so that's what I did. All this Xbox 360 stuff, but it was mostly throughout that era. And I was.
Do you guys like challenge each other to like basketball games or? I'm just envisioning like the Office, you know, when they would challenge the
warehouse,
to some kind of. Okay, so there weren't any like grudge matches between GameSpy and IGN staff?
Not really. Well, no, because I mean, IGN was always like the big dog, right? Like, I mean, they were the really popular like big site, whereas like GameSpy was like we were just doing our thing, like trying to like keep above water essentially. But like it's weird because like I remember working there when Greg Miller was hired, and like Nick Scarpino was our video guy. And those guys have gone on to like found Kind of Funny Games and are this huge deal now. And so it's like, man, it's so weird to think about back when, you know, we were all just like freshmen.
Back in my day.
Yeah. Well, because at this point I've been at Ubisoft for 10 years, so I'm an old man now. I'm like practically, I'm essentially immortal there, right? Like people are just like, oh, The old one.
Dude, that's a long time though. Like
Yeah.
for this industry, you know.
It is.
Because we were talking to, was it not last week or the week before, when we were talking to Kate Edwards, and she's been around for 26 years, or what was it?
Oh yeah, she's been doing it for a long time, and I'm not sure how long. Yeah,
That's incredible.
but yeah, she worked for Microsoft for a long time, and yeah, but yeah. So what was the transition then like for you? From how did you go from writing about games to working for Ubisoft?
So, I mean, writing about games is it's super fun. I really enjoy doing it, and like, but it's a lot of work. Like, it's a lot of like, there's a lot of where you're in the office and you're writing all the time, and then you go home and play the games. And it was always sort of this like, not really that much time in your actual life. It was sort of this all-consuming thing, and it didn't pay very much at the time. So like,
I think that's probably still the case.
Yeah, could be.
From what I understand.
But for sure, like, so I was getting ready to start a family and stuff, and had a baby on the way. So it's sort of like, well, I need to find out where to get some more money than what I'm getting right now. And a friend of mine who I used to work with at GameSpy, Patrick Joint, worked at Ubisoft. And I was like, he's like, hey, they have this new thing they're calling community developers. And it's kind of like what you're doing now on the forums at GameSpy, and like with this video stuff you're doing. So, and I know you love being on the podcast before, so maybe you want to like apply for it. And I did, and ended up there. But the position was from Montreal, which was like, okay, so I'm in San Francisco and applying for a position in Montreal. And it was funny because it was right around the time that Prince of Persia had just come out, Prince of Persia 2008, which I really, really liked. That was a cel-shaded one where they had Elika like as the prince's like partner in crime.
Yeah. Was that the one with the time rewind mechanic?
I'm trying to remember because I don't.
That was the first one, right? That was the
that's
PS2 one.
Time
I
had
think.
that
Sands of
in there.
Time.
Sands of Time.
But yeah, Prince of Persia 2008 was like a reboot of the franchise. So yeah, it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
I think I think Elika she would rescue you if you fell, rather than it being like a time rewind kind of thing. But I love that game. I loved Rainbow Six at that time, Vegas, and Vegas 2. And so I knew that those are Ubisoft Montreal games. They also did Splinter Cell and stuff like that. So I'm just like, I mean, if I had to choose what game publisher I'd want to work for, I think it would be Ubisoft. I think the studio would be Montreal. So I was like, I'm gonna go for it. And
yeah, this is reminding me of how many Ubisoft games I've loved, because I love the original Splinter Cell trilogy.
Yeah.
Those
Dude,
were
where's Splinter Cell, man?
No comment. I have nothing to say. But yeah, so like I was super into it. I did like, oh gosh, I don't know, like 6 or 7 interviews. Some were phone interviews, some were in San Francisco. But the question they kept asking me was like, okay, so you know that Montreal is really cold, right? I'm like, look, I'm a California Bay Area native. I like, no, I have no idea how cold it is. Like, I can't even fathom it.
Totally.
But you know, I enjoy going snowboarding. Is that like something similar? Like, I will drive 5 hours to get to the snow.
Yeah. You're at least like Northern California, so there's mountain stuff, you know? Because I'm in like Southern California, so we have no concept of
it's
snow
always
or cold.
But see, the thing too, though, is that in Southern California, like, it's a dry heat, right? Like, it's like a desert heat almost, right? And that's the thing that like really struck me the most is after I moved. Okay, so yeah, cold is cold, but I don't really mind it so much. You can bundle up. I can survive in the cold. But then in the summers in Montreal and in the East Coast in general, I discovered it gets humid. Oh, humidity. You step out into this soup and it's just like, oh, I did not sign up for this. I did not. But the cold, you warned me about the cold. You didn't warn me about this weird, like, ugh.
Yeah. sticky. It doesn't matter
It
how many
does not-
showers
you get
you
out of the
take.
shower and you're instantly just like,
Yeah.
why did I get out?
It's funny because, like, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and people say that about Nashville, but there's places that are way worse than that, so I don't feel that way about here. But I think if you came here, you would feel that way about it for sure.
But the springs are amazing in Montreal. Incredible. Especially since winter is like 8 months out of the year or something like that. It's something absurd. When it's spring.
Oh man. Like how cold does it get there in the winter?
I'll give you a perfect example.
How cold
all
are we
right.
talking?
So it's in Canada where they use the Celsius system as opposed to Fahrenheit, which was another adjustment for me. But you'll be interested to know that negative 40 degrees, which is about as cold as it gets in Montreal in Celsius, negative 40 degrees in Celsius is where it meets the Fahrenheit scale. So negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit and negative 40 degrees Celsius are the same temperature.
I don't feel encouraged. I feel like you're trying to say this is an encouraging thing, and I do not feel encouraged.
At those temperatures, it's that I don't know if you've seen this before, but if you like boil a pot of water, you could just throw it up into the air, and it just instantly becomes mist. Yeah, your nostril hairs will freeze together at that temperature. You get ice in a beard, it's
physically painful.
It's crazy too, because if you go out in that weather, it's like being an astronaut. Like you have to like bundle up so much, you can't hear anything. Especially there's snow. The snow also muffles noise a ton. Like so, everything's just like all you hear is your breath, like stepping out.
So that was your biggest hurdle. You're like, sounds rad. Ubisoft's made all these games I love. Sounds pretty rad to work there. It would help your family situation because, as we talked about before, people who write about games don't make a whole lot of times. Maybe that's changed now, but I don't think it has. So how did you finally get over that hump of being like, all right, I'm going to brave the cold?
Well, I think it was mostly just like whether, my partner and I would actually be able to go through with it and move across the country. That was the biggest thing. But her family is from New York State, which is it's like actually right next to Quebec. Mm-hmm. So her family was quite close to us and within driving distance. So it's sort of like, all right, let's just do it. Let's go. Go. And, like the entire process, I think it was never like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was definitely scary because, especially with, so we had my son Helix on December 1st of 2008, and then we moved in March of 2009. Okay. So it was like he was 4 months old when we moved, and
he was your first?
Yeah. So it was
just like, throw all these major life changes in a short window of time.
It was,
That's adventure.
Yeah. There was at least one instance where I was trying to drive into work and I could not, for the life of me, find parking. And Helix and my partner were traveling to visit her parents for a while, and like. I was just driving around for like an hour looking for parking, and finally just pulled over to the side of the road and texted like the guy that I was working with, and just like I just collapsed into tears. I was just like, this is awful. I moved my family across the country for this. Like, we're in a completely different country. I don't know if this job is working out. Like, here I am, like not able to even find parking. It's just like,
oh no!
It was for sure. There were those moments where it was just like, what have I done?
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Especially as like a new dad, it was like I have a responsibility for my family to like do everything I can for them, right? And like, it just felt like I was failing at that, and that was super hard. But ultimately, 10 years later, I think it's going better.
You did it. It's better.
Yeah.
I only have one breakdown a week now instead of every day.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good. So you started working at I always say Ubisoft, but I feel like a lot of other people say Ubisoft.
Yeah,
I can't break the habit.
there's been whole like
What do you-
campaigns about it. Which one?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's Ubisoft.
We should boycott. Let's boycott on the forums about it.
No, it's either one. That's the thing. Is that
Okay.
it depends where you're from. Because if you're from like France, for example, it stands for ubiquitous software. So in
Yeah.
English we say ubiquitous, but in French you say ubiquitous. So it's in France it can be Ubisoft, but in the United States it's Ubisoft with the Y.
Yeah. So do most of the people in your office, I assume, probably speak English?
Well, it actually
Or how does that
so
work?
the official
I'm
language
curious.
of Quebec, which is where Montreal is a province in Canada, and the official language is French. So all
Right.
of our
But I was just assuming because the studio being...
I mean,
That's probably a bad assumption. But I was just assuming the studio...
Yeah, it is a bad assumption, Drew. You're right.
I don't need to agree like just so completely, but
No, that was perfect. Put him in his place.
No, that's great. I
He
needed
needs
that.
Far Cry 2 sucks. I'm just kidding.
but yeah, no, there's
And shut your dirty mouth.
most of the work I do is for sure in English because I speak predominantly English. I have had to learn how to speak French, mostly in order to earn permanent residency there as an immigrant to the province.
But you didn't have to learn French to do the work you were... Did you know much French before you
None.
came there?
I didn't know any. And it's funny because they tell you
Nice.
that it's not that big of a deal. And for the most part, like I think you can get by. Certainly for the work that I do, because so much of it is on the internet and on the English-speaking internet. It's actually more important for me to be able to speak English and communicate clearly in English. Like at the time, they were hiring a lot of journalists and writers specifically because we need to be able to communicate in English.
Right.
But yeah, for sure. Like when I got there, and even now, there are meetings that are held entirely in French, and it can be challenging if like even just to keep up with a presentation, because the Quebecois French is a little bit different than the French that is spoken in France, as a heavily accented, and they use a few like different words and things, different colloquialisms and stuff. But yeah, it's not something I run into too much trouble with, or ever really did. I mean, it's like at least not at work. But it does make your like daily interactions outside of work more challenging because if you run into someone who doesn't speak English, you end up doing this pantomime thing and that doesn't really get the point across. And you don't realize like how many mistakes can be made in terms of like how much a bell pepper costs and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming your wife probably didn't speak English either. Speak French when y'all moved as well.
No, she did not.
She
did not.
Yeah. So then you've got all the fun of like trying to find friends and community and stuff in a place where people don't necessarily, you don't share the same first language.
It's true.
I'm sure that can be challenging
although
too.
I will say that there were quite a few like expats, as they call them. So we have a bunch of people from the United Kingdom who come over because there's a lot of development going on in England and all over the United Kingdom. So there's there was an effort to make people feel connected and at home to a degree. And there's also also a fairly large English population, particularly in Montreal. Like in general in Quebec, I think there's not once you get outside of the city, it starts to become more prevalent that it's all 100% French, and people are now also not able to speak English, like they don't know English. Whereas in the city, it's like a lot more bilingual, and you don't run into too many blockages like that.
Right. Yeah. So, tell us like some of the games that you've worked on at Ubisoft in your decade of employment there. Like, what are some things you're proud of that you've worked on?
Wow. Okay. So I think like I spent a couple of years where they wanted me to kind of be a licensed guy. So I worked on Shaun White's snowboarding and James Cameron's Avatar the game in the like first year of my
Mm-hmm.
career, and then I switched over to Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands, which was like post reboot and like the major trilogy for Sands of Time and Warrior
Mm-hmm.
Within and uh, that most people remember. So it was like a smaller entry in the series that like this brought back the time rewind mechanic and stuff like that. It was fun. But after that, I was assigned to Assassin's Creed, starting with Brotherhood, um, and worked on Assassin's Creed until we wrapped up Syndicate. And then we had a year off where we released the movie. And during that year, I left that team just before they announced Origins, I think, um, to work on Rainbow Six for a little
Mm-hmm.
while, Rainbow Six Siege. Um, and then so I was on Rainbow Six Siege for Operation Health, and I forget actually which season. I think it was year two, season. I want to say season two. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. Now I'm terrible. But I can't remember which one it
Yeah.
was. But like to be honest, like the Rainbow Six development was like non-stop, always like
Oh
going
yeah, I
in a
bet.
way that was drastically different from Assassins.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Assassins was wild because they were doing annual releases, and it started with Brotherhood, and it was kind of there was so much concern over whether people would respond to Brotherhood because it came right after Assassin's Creed 2, which was the highest scoring Assassin's Creed, like blew Assassin's Creed 1 out of the water in terms of like the response it
Mm-hmm.
got.
Yeah.
And so everyone was worried about Brotherhood. They're like, they're going to do another game with Ezio. It's like Assassin's Creed 2.5 was what we kept hearing, and like going from E3 into like the launch season in the fall was just like, oh, everyone was so worried and stuff. But man, that team just knocked it out of the park,
Yeah.
and it was wild because like the game came out and people loved it, and it was like there's no question that Ezio was like a great assassin, and
It's the
they
freaking
had done
man.
wonders with Rome, and yeah, so
I
it
loved it.
was,
It was a great game. I remember playing a lot of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood.
yeah, it was. I mean, in a lot of ways, like in the same way that Assassin's Creed 2 was kind of like a bunch of things, like all the things that they had wanted Assassin's Creed 1 to be, but like maybe ran out of time or like
Right.
like can only do so
Mm-hmm.
much, and especially during that era where you don't get to do as much post launch updating as you do now.
Right.
Like now it's
Totally.
expected,
Yeah.
right,
Yep.
that you have like season pass or like a roadmap, all these different things,
Mm-hmm.
all these different names that we have for like the live side of the the sequence sort of. But yeah, so and then we followed that up the next year with Revelations, and it was like I really did feel like a rocket ride because the games were just becoming so popular,
Mm-hmm.
and the scale at which like it was kind of wild because at that point like nobody was working at that scale, right? Like especially for
Right.
community, like we had like one of the biggest communities, like Facebook launched their like corporate pages with Assassin's Creed as one of the first ones, and we had to like map out all the milestones of the series and stuff. It was just a wild time, and like I like it's funny because like recently we'd have to ask like they did the 10th anniversary, and the community team was like, hey, do you have any like photos from back in the day of like when it's like no, because one, like if I was taking photos, I was taking photos of like the community and like cosplayers
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like or the booth or whatever. But then also like it was with the camera. Like we didn't have cameras in our phones back then.
That's funny.
Like it's we're talking about the olden days.
Yeah, it's the Stone Age, dude.
But yeah, so and then after Assassin's Rainbow, I worked on a bunch of our VR stuff. So Eagle Flight and Star Trek Bridge Crew.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that stuff was really fun because I mean, man, VR is really cutting edge, and to be honest, like it, it was fun to do just because of all the testing and stuff that we had to do for like researching like everybody else's VR games, and we have the VR lab in the studio, and you just go in on the weekend and get real sick.
Did it make you sick, VR?
Sometimes. I mean, I got pretty good VR legs, and like a lot of the UB games, they put a lot of sort of features to try and prevent that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's nice.
But yeah, I mean, and it's all a learning process too, because like the things that make you sick are pretty common to like every person. So like a roller coaster simulator, if you look to the to your side, it's almost guaranteed to make you super sick.
Great.
Because that's just it's whenever you create a disagreement between your inner ear and what your eye is telling your brain. Like your brain is like, oh, we've been drugged. Time to throw up.
Sound the alarm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, we do like to go a little bit personal in this podcast, and ask people what they're about and where they grew up and that kind of thing. So, where did you grow up, and what was your upbringing like?
So, like, I grew up in Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco, in the wine country.
Okay.
And that was like, to be honest, it's weird because I feel like a lot of people grow up and they're like, "Ah, man, my home is like the best place in the world." But I like, I've been to a lot of different places, and I still feel like that area is. It's just magical, like redwoods and vineyards and like.
I mean, it's pretty hard to argue that is a magical place.
Like it's always 70 degrees. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I have been watching this series on Netflix called Murder Mountain. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's about Humboldt County, which I think.
Yeah. It's a little bit north of where I was, but yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah. So that place is not magical.
No.
According to that documentary.
If the thing is called Murder Mountain, yeah.
If that documentary series is accurate.
Too far north.
Anyway.
Too far north.
Too far north,
Just wanted to throw a little wrench in your... But no, it's about like marijuana growers out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess... connected to that, there's been a lot of like missing persons cases and things like that. So eventually this area started being known as Murder Mountain.
Yeah.
And anyway, it gets into all. It's interesting. It's worth checking out. But your area of Northern California, not Murder Mountain. It was really magical. What was magical about it? Sorry.
So it's funny because like my parents bought this house that was like on a mountain. And it was a half an hour away from the closest little town or whatever. Like it was, we had a creek and like I had a tree house and just was, I don't know.
So you grew up exploring the woods and the mountains and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was super like that. Like it was very, very like in the midst of nature.
Yeah. What did your parents do growing up?
So my dad was an administrator of a state hospital, and like my mom was a homemaker for much of my childhood. But then eventually, she started working at one of the local elementary schools. It's like like an administrator, I guess. Like she was the office. Okay. She was the office lady. She sat in the front office.
That's the official title.
Yeah. She sat in the front office.
She ran the school, basically.
Well, basically. Yeah.
I mean, the principal would beg to differ, probably, but I don't know how much.
Yeah. We know who's really pulling the strings.
Yeah,
it's the office lady.
Yeah. So what? Did you guys like go to church or anything? Were you a religious family in any way?
Well, I mean, that's what's kind of wild. It's like my mom used to say that, she was Catholic, but then we never went to church. And I'm just sort of like, I don't really know that you can say that if you're not going to follow the rules. Like, so we grew up.
That's the American way to like claim to be
Totally.
We grew up pretty
religious or whatever.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You just do whatever you want.
We grew up pretty secular, my sister and I. And even now, like I'm pretty agnostic in terms of like I don't know what it's all about or anything.
Yeah.
You know, like
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, we had like a Catholic school, and so there was always like contact with. We actually like in the elementary school that I grew up in, there were a couple of kids who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and there was one girl who lived next door to me, and I'll never forget. Like I must have been like 5 or 6 because we were in kindergarten, and we were walking down the driveway that was extremely long because we were like out in the country. And I was like, "Oh, do you want to come to my birthday party?" And she was like, "No, I can't." And I was like, "Oh, that's a bummer. Why can't you come to my birthday party?" She's like, "Because we aren't allowed to participate in celebrations like that. That's when the devil comes out and takes you to hell." I'm just like, "Well, I."
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
That escalated quick.
But I was just like, I've had 5 birthdays, and that hasn't happened once. Like we eat cake and stuff. Like it's really fun. I have never seen the devil at one of them.
Yeah.
It was
So it didn't have,
man.
So it didn't freak you out. It just like this doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, basically, because I was just like, and I think at that age you have a very like literal interpretation of what the devil is. Like he's an actual like red guy with horns and like goat hooves and a pitchfork, and I think actually, at one Halloween I went as.
I'm pretty sure I had the same idea back then.
One Halloween I went as a.
One Halloween you went. Yeah. Okay.
I wore like an all red costume.
Just to freak your friend out.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it like that, but geez, it's terrible now that I think about it.
I'll show you, devil. That's what you thought.
Horrible. What a horrible person. Horrible child.
I'm just kidding. I'm sure that wasn't why you did it.
No. Well, it's funny because actually, like that school, we were our for a while we had the mascot we were the demons, right? And so I was a demon, right? Or like a devil or demon or whatever. And then we changed it eventually because parents were complaining. They're like, "This is inappropriate for the children to be acting like demons."
That's interesting because you were up in California, which I imagine is I think of that as like a more progressive kind of area. I coached soccer for a while in Alabama, and the school that I coached at was our mascot, or was the Aggies. It was an agricultural area, and so the mascot was the Aggies. Well, like they thought an Aggie was lame, so they changed the mascot to like, it looks literally like the creepiest version of Satan you've ever seen. Like, it's supposed to be this red devil or whatever, but it looks like
the dude from Pan's Labyrinth.
Like full on, like creepy, pointy goatee and horns. Like horns, not just like curly horns, but like horns that are coming out of the guy's skull.
Whoa.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alabama's got no chill.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like a pretty conservative area and like religiously too. So a lot of like evangelicals there and stuff, but nobody was like, "Oh yeah, that's fine." They voted for it, and everybody's like, "Yeah, that's cool."
Good for them.
Nobody batted an eye about it.
Yep. Apparently, the progressive they were make no mistake, it was a bunch of hippies. Like at this elementary school, all the parents were like a bunch of hippies, but apparently there were some of them who were like, "Yeah, no, this isn't. It's too much, too far."
That's where they draw the line.
We draw the line.
Draw the line at demons.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you kind of grew up. You went to Catholic school and stuff, but you never really like. It just was never.
No, I didn't go to Catholic school. Like. I went to public school. For my entire like elementary and then junior and high school. Well, there was a Catholic school. Like there were Catholic schools in the area. Yeah.
Oh, in your area. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it's never like something you really gave much thought to?
Well,
Is that how you put it growing
I
up,
wouldn't
or?
say I didn't give it much thought. I just, it didn't seem like a thing that was in my life necessarily, right? Like I didn't,
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't engage with it very much, and like already was sort of kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I want to keep going to birthday parties, so I'm not going to do.
That's fair.
Yep.
So as a kid, I feel like that's really fair. Yeah.
And then
Because if I was told like, hey, you can't go to birthday parties anymore as a kid, I'd been like, I'm
You
gotta
rethink
find
this
something.
whole Jesus
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's, as I got older, I feel like you know, I I definitely acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of value in the narratives that you find in both the Old and the New Testament. Like
Mm-hmm.
then, but I think to me is I was more interested in incorporating like more different types of narratives, like um, and not like focusing specifically on the Bible, but like just like even just like fables and stuff to like
Uh-huh.
kind of like take the wisdom that I could where I could get it.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, so where do you said you see yourself as like agnostic essentially now, like you don't, I guess you just feel like there's a lot you don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it's hard to like land on something. Do you feel like there's like a value system or some core beliefs that you have that kind of motivate how you live and what you do? Do you have a sense of that? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Wow, that is a very deep question.
Don't screw this one up.
Right?
Don't screw this one up.
Yeah. Well,
It is.
Be careful.
it's funny because like looking at my roots, I would say that like a lot of my value system is probably extremely linked to what most people would consider do unto others as they would as you'd have them do unto you and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. I
Mhm.
mean, like I feel like to a degree growing up in the United States at all is hard to like not have that influence you in some way, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially like spending time with like my best friend in elementary school was Jewish, and they weren't like extremely orthodox or anything, but like being exposed to that like this other like belief system that the basic values are pretty similar, right? Like,
Mm.
but like but just knowing that like there are different things that people believed, I think was sort of like, you know what, I'm gonna just sort of try and pick and choose and like see what works for me. And to this day,
Mhm.
I still kind of do the same thing. Like I, I just try to make sure that I don't harm anyone, and I'm always working to like lift up like my fellow people in the world and do my best to leave the world a better place than when I arrived. And like the
Mm.
interpretation of how that's measured, I think like whether or not I feel like I'm being successful at that is the health and welfare of the people around me. um, and so I don't necessarily like put any hard and fast rules on it, I don't think, but for sure it's more just trying to like, I don't know, make sure. I mean, even in this job that I do, I often look at it as like a party, and it's my job to make sure everyone's having a good time, right? Like, so
Sure.
I sort of feel like,
Just a party with like millions of people, so no pressure.
and a lot of people who are not always having a good time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No pressure.
But yeah, when you succeed though, and like people are like really ecstatic about an announcement or a feature, or like anytime we get to do like a workshop where we bring fans into the studio and get them to interact with like developers directly, like that is such a tremendously
Mhm.
positive thing, I think. Like, because I
Yeah.
think any artist, um, if their art inspires other people to create art, that's like it's a massive win for them. It's like a huge like feeling of just like joy that you get from that. And so I like one of my
Hmm.
biggest things is just trying to facilitate that as much as I can. We do a lot of work with like cosplayers and fan artists and things like that to just try and like spread that creative energy and motivation.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, that's got to be a highlight for like a cosplayer, for instance, to get to meet the person that helped create the character they're cosplaying as. Like, yeah, that's. I can imagine that those would be high points for what you do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's when the job probably feels really easy.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Well, because it almost like never fails. It's wild. Like you put these people together, and you just get to bask in the vibes.
Right.
That, like,
you just stand back and smile like an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah.
What do you have coming up with anything you guys are working on at Ubisoft that you're excited about that you can tell us about, or is it all under wraps right now?
Like, to be honest, like the timing of this is a little bit ahead of E3, which is our like annual
exactly
huge deal. So yeah, no, I can't talk about anything. I mean,
do you usually go to a lot of conventions or just E3? Well, like you personally?
Yeah, me personally, this will be, I think, like my 16th E3. I think I'm gonna just say that's what it is because like it's too hard to remember.
Sure.
And I used to go to a lot more events, but I've sort of calmed down as I've grown in seniority a little bit, even with the same title, so that now I'm sort of like I fly a desk a lot more than I fly a jet fighter. So
just send those young bucks out there to do that.
Well, and also like after you've been to a few of these, they start and it's work. Totally. Like it's so much work. Like you're traveling, and then you have to like be on the entire time, and like it can be exhausting, as exciting as it is. So it's nice to kind of like take a step back a little bit and yeah, exactly. Let the young bucks in to go and take over some of these things.
Well, cool. Well, I wish you could tell us more. I'm sure you are excited about what you're what's coming up at E3, but
you can hear it in his restraint.
Yeah. I mean,
his excitement.
We just released the Division 2, and that's going really well. I mean, I played the heck out of it. I only just recently reached the max level on it and started like I haven't touched the end game yet, which is really exciting, but I haven't actually had a chance to mess around with it. The Odyssey just released some new DLC for it that looks ludicrous. I haven't even tried it yet, but it's like leaning heavy into the Greek myths and legends.
Gosh, that game is so freaking pretty.
It's incredible.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's weird to me because it's very different for an Assassin's Creed game, but like.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's pretty.
So pretty.
Oh my gosh, just the ocean and the beaches and stuff. Like I don't know. It's incredible. And Starlink also, as well, is a game that I was able to work on out of Ubisoft Toronto. Just released some new free DLC, as well as like new ships and pilots and stuff like that. Like we got a lot of stuff that we just have been working on, and then
next time.
Yeah, next time. Absolutely. Well, yeah. So, if people wanted to like follow the work that you do, what would be the best way to do that?
So you can find me on Twitter. My handle there is UbiGabe, and I have like UbiGabe on Facebook and a few other platforms, but really Twitter is the one I'm most active now. And since I am old enough that I can like decide like, okay, this one is going to be my channel. That's sort of the one that I've put down on.
Well, I would definitely encourage people to go go follow you on Twitter, and definitely be looking forward. We'll definitely be looking forward to what Ubisoft launches or announces at E3. That's always exciting. So, anywhere else people should find you or look for you online or anything that you would want to mention? Anything else you want to plug?
I don't think so. I think I got everything.
Sweet. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And if you want to follow Love Thy Nerd, please do that on all the social medias. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If there's another social media platform we should be on, just let us know. We'll try to make it happen. You can go join our community on Facebook. Just search for Love Thy Nerd Community. So you're going to want to like Love Thy Nerd on Facebook and then search for the Love Thy Nerd community and ask to join. Once we've made sure you're not a robot, we'll let you right in. What else? We have a podcast network. This is one of 3 podcasts. We have the Pull List, which is our comic book podcast, and we have Free Play, which gets into all areas of nerd culture, and it's just a blast to listen to. We have 2 live shows, Beard Bros, which they mostly review board games every Friday, and then we also have Co-optional, where we get to Matt and his wife, one of our founders of Love Thy Nerd, will play a board game together, and then they'll give away a copy of that board game, which is pretty cool. So definitely go check those out. I think that's basically it for us. Go rate and review our podcast. And also, I'd just like to give a reminder. I've been forgetting to do this, and I really need to remember. We can't do this podcast. We can't have awesome people like Gabe on this podcast. We can't do the awesome content that we produce every week at lovethynerd.com, all the great articles and insight that we publish there without your help. So if you think what we do is rad, would you consider supporting us monthly? Just go to lovethynerd.com/partner and you can help us out.
And even if you think what we do is lame, just play like a hilarious practical joke on us and give us money anyways.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Right?
Yeah.
That'll show us.
Yeah, that's right. I like it. Well, thanks, Gabe. This was
Yeah,
awesome
thanks for having me
chatting
on.
with
This was incredible.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.